Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Impact Farming Show. Today, we have an amazing guest. We have Crystal Mackay joining us. How are you?
I am great. Thanks, Tracy.
Good. I'm so happy to have you on the show. Crystal is the founder of Loft 32, Utensil.ca, and today we're going to be chatting about a very important subject, telling our story as farmers. And I don't think there is a better person on the planet to talk to us about this message. So, Crystal, you have a long history in connecting people and connecting agriculture with the urban population. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are? Then we'll move into Loft 32, Utensil.ca, and some of the different things you do. And then we're going to talk to the farmers in the audience about how to tell our story. So, Crystal, tell us about you.
Yeah, amazing. Thanks, Tracy. Well, I have a kind of an interesting story in that I didn't quite start on the farm. My mom's family farm is, if you've ever flown into the Toronto airport, is Dixon Road. Is Toronto Airport is there? That's where my mom's family farm was. So I grew up there. The farmhouse is still there, just a couple of blocks over, Kipling and Dixon, till I was 7. So I grew up near there. And then my parents, who are both farm people, are like, okay, we don't want to raise our family in the city, moved 6 hours away, bought a farm in the Ottawa Valley. So literally changed my life. I went from one house cat to like 25 barn cats and, a pony and a calf, and the rest is history, right? So I always felt I was a natural ambassador for agriculture because I felt a little more grateful and appreciative of moving to the farm than some of my farm friends. Even though, lots of hard work, you're doing hay instead of going to the beach and all those things. But I just loved it so much. And I have 100 cousins. The Mackays are a big clan. So I always had lots of city cousins come and spend, we'd call it farm camp, come and work and stay on the farm. So I was just a natural, I just loved it so much. I became an ambassador basically from a young age. And then when I was in high school, I took on a volunteer opportunity, which at the time was called Dairy Princess, now called Dairy Educator, where you'd go into classrooms, and I did the crown and sash, and kids asked me where, if I had a Dairy King, and all the funny things, and I just loved it so much. I'm a big proponent of agriculture in the classroom. And I just wished for a career talking to people about farming. So I'm a good example of be careful what you wish for because it just might happen, right? So from there, I went on to the University of Guelph, studied animal science, but always with heart for kind of bridging gaps between farmers and consumers. My first job out of university, I'm not going to tell you about every job, but this one was important, was a dream job. And the joke was I would have paid them. It was the Ontario Farm Animal Council, which I was the summer student who went back to become the CEO, which is now Farm and Food Care. But at the time, Ontario Farm Animal Council, and there were other farm animal councils in BC, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta at the time. Going back a couple decades, I spent 100 days a year at public events. So often standing in front of farm animals or displays, with a spin the wheel and answer a trivia question, whatever it might be, but often difficult questions, standing in front of a veal calf or a sow or a hen or a steer, answering sometimes tough, but often amazing questions about where our food comes from. And I call that my time in the trenches, real conversations with thousands of people, many of whom never have seen a farm animal before or thought about where their food comes from. So that's kind of my backstory. Then fast forward many years, I kind of just went through some into different leadership roles in the pork industry, helped create Farm and Food Care, Canadian for Center for Food Integrity. But really, my whole career has been about having better conversations about food and farming.
Excellent. You had told me your story and I forgot bits and pieces. So I'm like, oh, yeah, right. That's
Yeah,
so
piecing
cool.
it together.
Yeah,
Yeah,
piecing
yeah.
it together. That's fantastic. So in 2019, I think, or somewhere around there, you
Mhm.
founded Loft 32. Can you tell us about your company?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like every good business, the idea started in Vegas, which is hilarious. But I'm breaking the rule of Vegas because I talk about it. But
Oh, yeah,
whatever,
yeah,
it's worth it, right?
yeah.
So,
That's
myself and another a farm friend, Maggie Van Camp, who's a chicken farmer and was assistant editor at the time of Country Guide, and a bunch of other ladies went to Vegas for National Rodeo Finals, which is a great time if you've never been. And it's the whole city's country and western, and of course cowboys and fun, and just a great time. And while we were there, the conversation started about our next chapters. We were turning 50, and we're like, what are we going to do for the next chapters of our career? And that fun conversation turned into a serious one, and just kept percolating, over the months, to say, what problems can we solve? What do we love doing? Who do we want to work with? Kind of what solutions can we provide? What brings us joy? And the answer was people, the people in agriculture. You're our people, right? We love farmers. We love people who work in agriculture. When you and I are at a CAMA meeting, these are our people. It lifts you up. So the concept of Loft 32 was born. So to elevate people and business and conversations on food and farming, and with 3 buckets of work. So we have a talent stable of speakers. So we have about 30 speakers from across North America that can talk about anything agriculture and food. Training, which is where I love to spend time. So helping other people become better communicators. And then special projects, which, big question mark, could be anything: strategy, communications, execution, depends whatever people are looking for, but just kind of wide open, but always in the agriculture and food and communications and business related topics.
Interesting. I didn't know that story and how it got
Yeah.
started. What happens in Vegas?
I know I break the rules, but we are in the comms business, so we have to talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Okay, so Utensil.ca. You launched
Yeah.
that. Where does that fit in?
Yeah.
And what is the mission vision behind Utensil.ca?
Yeah, so utensil, which is a helpful tool, because it's a utensil, whether it's a shovel or a spoon. So Andrew Campbell, who's a well-known dairy farmer and former journalist who now jokes, he thinks about communications while he's milking cows, who's just awesome. This became our COVID project, and that idea actually started at a Best of Cama, when we're like, we should do something together, but we don't know what it is, which was pre-COVID. But I had this idea for an online training platform to say, I mean, I've trained farmers on how to be better spokespeople for 30 years, literally. Just how to speak up, how to tell your story, how to have, difficult conversations, but in small groups. And I say lovingly, often in a church basement, the local fair, whatever, your office, where you have small groups of people, which is really effective, but we're not going to reach enough people in an accessible way. So if you missed the workshop last week, you're kind of out of luck, right? So the idea of Utensil was to offer online accessible training 24/7, affordably priced,
Mm.
targeting anybody who works in agriculture, farmers. And specifically, we developed some tools for people who are not from farms. That was one of our target audience as well. So we have a course, for example, called So Your Client's a Farmer. So to say, here's some context and advice. You and I know we need to welcome a lot more people to our food system who do not have farm backgrounds. There's not enough farm kids to go around. And quite frankly, sometimes we give farm kids a pass. If you grew up on a berry farm in Nova Scotia, it doesn't mean you understand grain farming in Manitoba, right? Our food system's diverse.
Yes.
So it's a mix of tools. It's mostly skills based, but there is some content and context as well about agriculture. So the idea is online, accessible. It could be Sunday night at 10 o'clock. Someone could log in and say, I'm going to do a media training session.
Wow, fantastic. So a
Yeah,
farmer can just log on any point, look at what's offered, buy a course, I assume, and then get
absolutely.
consuming? Ooh,
Yeah, exactly. So most of them are on-demand courses. The newest one we just offered, which you're going to talk to Maggie Van Camp, is about succession planning for farmers. So you'll find out more about Farmers Bridge. So that's more for farmers specifically. The rest are more for anybody in the food system. So whether it's media training, social media training, what's your personal brand? How do you represent your farm or your company on your grow your brand side? And then the one specifically for people not from a farm, there's 2 products there. One is So Your Client's a Farmer. So whether you work for government, a business, an association that represents farmers, I think everyone who works for a Ministry of Agriculture, for example, should take that, to be like, here's who you work for and with, and here's what matters to them, right? Here's advice from farmers. And then the final piece is a bit more content heavy. It's called Utensil 101, which is a video library of over 50 short video clips, which is designed for you're a smart person, but maybe you don't know about this topic. So, from fun things like what's the difference between hay and straw to more complicated topics like what is supply management?
Yeah.
And Andrew and I boldly say better than Google. We're like, please don't Google these topics.
Mm,
Can you imagine the answer you'd get if, how are antibiotics used on farms? Or, tell me about pesticides. That's like a huge rabbit hole, right? And like what's credible, what's Canadian, what's current. So someone can go into Utensil 101, like a trusted resource, and say, I want to know more about this. This will get you started. And then with tips on where to go for more information.
wow. That's fantastic. And you know what? We need that. We need that for so many reasons. For the person in the industry that works with farmers, for
Yeah.
farmers, I mean, I'm a farmer, I've been around it, and I still don't know everything about grain or cattle,
Right.
right? So,
Exactly.
and you know what?
Exactly.
Okay, it's pretty early in the episode for a Tracy
Yeah.
rant, but really quick here. You don't know how many times I listen to podcasts. I love podcasts. That's how I learn. But the funny thing is, these are gals that are amazing at marketing or whatever the podcast I'm listening to. And then they got to give their personal opinion about drinking milk or eating meat.
Oh,
And I'm sitting
totally.
there, I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, great. We're all allowed to have our opinions. But just because you have a platform and millions
Yes.
of people that listen to your podcast, stay in your lane. Sorry.
Right. Yeah, no,
We're only
absolutely.
15
Yeah.
minutes in and I'm doing
Yeah.
it. But you know what? So relevant because actually this will lead into my next point that I'm going to ask you about. I'm a farmer. I don't
Mhm.
know everything, and I know that. And even myself with the platform here, there's times where something will be said, and sometimes you can address it, and sometimes you can't. And then other times I go, oh, I don't feel like I know enough. And then I'm like, ooh, I'm going to not say anything because I don't want to mess up. And it's quite funny. The
100%.
people that don't have any facts are confident and they'll speak
Yes.
it. But that's really why I wanted to do this episode with you because we as farmers listening to this, we farm. But even at that, I know I'm not shy. And exactly like I just said, I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to say that. What if I get my facts and figures wrong?
Right.
So, can you speak to that and
Yeah.
what your experience has been? Kind of just take that where you want to go with that.
Yeah, well, all amazing points. I would say I agree, a lot of people with platforms that have a lot of reach don't have the depth of knowledge, and then
Yeah.
farmers are the reverse, right? We have the most knowledge
Yeah.
and the smallest platforms or the smallest voice, right? With the
Yes.
exception of a few, really shining stars. So, my the call to action about tell your story, which I feel like a broken record, and we've heard it for a long time. It's never been more important at a time when Canadians are really concerned about cost of food, having food security. It's we are the number one issue, and so the first. I guess I would say challenge I would say to every farmer in Canada is to stop pigeonholing ourselves into that we're only 2% of the population, our
Mm,
voice is too small. Reverse it and be like, you are the most important piece in our food system, which is the most important issue to Canadians right now, more than healthcare, economy, energy, all those big deal issues. We are part of the solution about the most important issue to Canadians. So the first thing is shift our mindset away from like, poor us, we're too small, we don't have a voice, to be like, no, you're talking about something that really matters to Canadians. Finally, because when I first was in this ball game of having conversations with Canadians, I felt we had to kind of stand on our head and juggle. They're like, as long as it's cheap, we don't care, And even our own food system partners, quite frankly, they didn't care about sourcing Canadian. Some did, this is a blanket statement, but many actually didn't like the buy Canadian branding because it limited their ability to buy and source whatever's cheapest, what's on sale. Right. So they were actually kind of pushing against it. So now we have a food system, we have consumers that are interested in where their food comes from. It's just such a prime opportunity to say, we really need to, they want to hear from you. They want to hear the farm story more than ever, I would say.
nice. Great answer. I kind of opened that right
Yeah.
up, not
No,
to
it was wide
discuss.
open, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and the thing for us as farmers, it's never been easier because you look, when I started this media company 17 years ago, I was competing against media companies. The the cost to get in and start a company and get yourself going and known was really high. But now the amazing thing is every farmer usually has a social media account, if not one on every
Mhm.
platform. And if you look at some of the farm women and farm men out there, they've developed huge audiences. And within their audience,
Absolutely.
of course, they'll grow in the amazing work they do. But in there, there's going to be city people, country people, there's going to be their friends and family, strangers. So now more than ever, it's easier for farmers to tell our story versus, let's say, when I started this, it was just your news companies, your CNN,
Mhm.
your CBC, right? That controlled the
Yeah.
narrative. Now, as farmers, we have an even playing field, a powerful tool at our hands. So,
Yes.
before I know you have some amazing tips that you want to share with our audience, I want to ask you two things: what you see farmers doing correctly, and then some of the biggest mistakes. Because I know
Mhm.
you have worked with a lot of farmers
Mhm.
telling the story. What do we do
Yeah.
right? What do we do wrong?
So, what do we do right? I would say, to your point from a minute ago, more and more people are stepping up and, sharing with transparency. Andrew Campbell, we talked about him, started that hashtag Farm 365. Like sharing pictures from direct from the farm. So, I'm seeing a commitment to transparency to say, I want to share what's happening on our farm or our family. Just being really open. So, that's different, than it was, even 15 years ago. So, there were a few people doing it, but now it's definitely just become more mainstream to be like, yeah, I want to share the farm story. We're going to be part of Agricultural Literacy Month, or we're going to host a farm tour or breakfast on the farm. We're seeing open farm days. We're seeing, I would say, the trend to being more open and sharing what we do is amazing. So
Yeah.
that's on the good side. On the bad side, and I don't say bad, on the area that needs improvement, I would say is we're still preachy.
Mm,
So, very lots of facts. We're going to educate people into improving their impression about farming. And I can tell you, I've tried lot for many years. I've tried. We are not going to educate our way out now, with the exception clause of agriculture in the classroom, which is where kids are in school to be educated. So that's a different. So we'll park that over there. But for everybody out of school, if you wanted to learn about how your car is made, you don't really want to be educated. You just might want to know a little bit more.
yeah.
So, research shows that 2/3 of Canadians are interested in knowing more about where their food comes from, but less than 20% want to learn more. So that's a really critical difference. So, you don't need to, if you picture you're at a barbecue with a bunch of neighbors, you don't need a PowerPoint with 20 stats. And so we tend to be very fact heavy. And, it's like, oh, you don't believe me? Well, here's another fact. Oh, you still feel negative about it? Here's another study. We're very, very fact heavy because we're used to talking to our peers, and we're very science based and results based. And so that's how we're used to talking to each other. But think about, you go to a barbecue, people don't want a fact sheet, like here's a PDF of 20 facts, right? Like, no, they want to have a conversation. And so I think the biggest area we need improvement is conversation includes listening. And
Mm.
it so to engage somebody, you need to ask them some questions. You don't stand on a soapbox with a megaphone and just shout your facts. It's not going to change things. You need to sit down and say, what worries you about your food? What questions do you have about farming? Okay, I appreciate that. Here's what I'm feeding my family too. I eat the same food you do. Let's have a chat about it, right? Like, to be more conversational, less lecture.
I like that. I'm not great at I'm not great at asking questions. That's my whole job. And I just said I'm
I
not
know.
great. Personally, on a
I think you're pretty good.
well, thank you. But sometimes maybe on that intimate setting where you're talking, yeah, you feel I guess you don't want to be caught off guard. So you're like, I'm going to have these facts and figures and things
Mm,
ready. So you're more in your head versus in your heart. But I like that question you
yeah,
just asked about what worries you about your food. What a
yeah,
nice, soft, powerful, open ended question. That's amazing. I like that one. And
good.
then
Yeah,
they can
it's
say,
easy.
right?
Yeah,
They
it's
can say
easy.
versus us just saying, well, it's this. And then, yeah, it's like you're a spray hose. You're like, well, we only put this much vaccines
Exactly,
in
and
them.
you're
And they're like,
defensive. Yeah,
right? Oh, I like
exactly.
that. Okay.
Yeah. So, definitely shifting from education, classrooms aside, for the regular person outside of a class to engagement. So, two-way, listening, asking questions, sharing your personal story. And I always think about what's the difference between you and Google? Remember, I said Utensil.ca better than Google. A conversation with you is better than Googling facts about farming. And why is that? What's the difference? What do you bring? Right. So, what do you bring to a conversation? People can Google facts all day long. They can look up real dirt on farming, virtual farm tours. There's facts all over the internet. So, when I think about your listeners and, people we're talking with, I think about why are you more powerful than Google? Because you really are
Yeah.
when you're having a conversation or you get the chance to stand up and make a point at a public meeting, that's way more powerful than 20 facts.
Wow. You're reminding me. Can I just throw a quick story in here, Crystal? You're reminding me
Absolutely.
of I can be a chatty Cathy, right? Like not
Yeah,
extreme
like
and not
this. Yeah.
introverted, but very often I'll be at a store, somebody's beside you. And I remember this time I was in the health store buying electrolytes. And then this husband and wife came up to me and they're like, they were looking for electrolytes too. And I said, I'm doing this. And they're like, oh, interesting. And it came out that I was a farmer. They're like, oh, wow, that's good. And we are talking about food. They're like, well, you have farm meat. So at least you know your meat is raised and where it
Yes.
comes from and it's healthy. And then I proceeded to tell them, I said, well, most of the time, actually, we don't even eat our own farm meat. I go to the grocery store because we sell our animals and I eat from the grocery store. And they're like, really? I said, yeah, the meat that's in the store, there's nothing wrong with it. And then you wouldn't believe how many times they say that. "Oh, at least you
Yeah.
know your
You
meat's
have your
healthy."
own food.
Where it's
Yeah.
raised from, it's like, "Oh my goodness," right? But that
Mhm.
simple little
Mhm.
conversation, she's like, "Wow, I didn't realize that," right?
I love
Anyways,
that.
that was
Yeah.
it. Okay, so don't be preachy, don't be on the soapbox.
Yeah.
I love that open-ended question. What worries you about your food? Because they are all conditioned to be worried about the food,
100%.
right?
Well, and think about, with our respect to our friends in media, good news doesn't sell.
Right.
So, right, a friend of mine used to be an editor at Maclean's, and I was asking him one day, I'm like, farmers are doing an amazing job. We're producing food, caring for the planet better than ever. Like, why can't we get into the media more? And he said, Crystal, thousands of planes take off from airports every day, and we don't cover it.
Right.
Right? So it's our job to reverse the tide to say, I think people want to hear the good news, just like your health food story. They want to hear your perspective. It'll give them some sense of relief, maybe less guilt. It's not what they heard on social media from, some other critic source, to say, wow, I never, if they have the chance to meet a real farmer or somebody who works in agriculture with some credible information, they're really, for the most part, open to listening.
Yeah. And how random for them. How often do they end up talking to some
Yeah.
chatty Cathy farmer about meat
Yeah,
in
at the
in
grocery
the
store.
electrolyte aisle, right?
I
So,
love that, and I guarantee you the ultimate of that one is they will tell somebody else about your conversation.
yeah, I
You'll be
think
like,
so.
"You'll never believe it. I met this farmer today." And first of all, you might not look like their stereotype of what they think a farmer looks
Right?
like either. I love that. So
Totally.
it's like break some stereotypes, and then if they tell someone else about it, that's like double win. Because 'Cause they're like, "Oh, I was," because it was an interesting did you know moment for them.
Yeah. And you can just see when you read the body language, you're like,
Yeah, they were like, "Oh,
okay.
I didn't know that."
Like,
Yeah,
wow, that was
exactly.
easy. But yet sometimes
Yeah.
I still think I don't know enough or have my fact sheet. Pull out the fact sheet, right?
Yeah, pull out the fact sheet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I jumped in there. Anything
No,
else
good.
you want to share about what we do correctly, things that need improvement before you give some tips to our audience?
I just would say the only thing I've always hoped for is bigger reach. So we have a lot of amazing efforts, and we've listed lots of them, whether it's local fairs, open farm days, the all the work our amplifier groups are doing. And I just want all of those numbers to be millions, not thousands or hundreds. So I just think, I know there's some new efforts that are underway that are going to help, I think, achieve those millions. And there's some existing ones out of Saskatchewan, Canadian Food Focus, Real Dirt on Farming's been around for over a decade. Those they're in the millions now, and that's amazing. And we need more millions, to just say every local effort is great. And we need to continue that because those one on one conversations and meeting your neighbors and who's in the grocery store, right? Those kinds of things are gold. But to really elevate the Canadian impression of agriculture and understanding of where their food comes from, we need some big hitting campaigns that are big, big picture.
Yeah, I agree.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
You're
So,
welcome.
you have a few tips you'd like to share. So,
I
somebody's in the
do.
audience, they want to tell their story. Can you share a few powerful tips with us?
Absolutely. Well, there's so many, but let's start with my top three. So, first of all, to talk about what you know. And you alluded to this when you said you get uncomfortable when you're like, I'm not really sure, so you don't want to speculate about something. So, if you talk about what you know and you talk about your own farm, you'll always be more confident and more passionate. So I have a tougher job. I mean, I have my own farm too, but I don't use it as an example too often. But I usually have to talk about most farms. Usually, sometimes I have to use all those wiggle words when you're talking about your own farm. Like you're like, on our farm, our cattle care comes first. We feed cows before we have Christmas dinner. My dad missed my grade 8 graduation because a cow was calving. Apparently, I'm still in therapy about that one. But anyway, that's a true story. And so, sharing about things from your own farm, you'll always be more interesting as opposed to like there are 19,000 farmers that are doing, that's not as interesting. So if you have your own farm or you have access to share a real farm story, if you work in agriculture, you don't have your own farm, visit some, talk to your members, talk to your clients and be like, I just visited this feed lot. They feed the Smarties that aren't the right colors to the cows. Like, have some real examples of real farms and you'll be better. You'll be better as a spokesperson and way more interesting than generalizing.
That makes sense. That's a powerful one. Yeah.
It's very powerful. And then you don't and avoid speculation. If you're talking to a reporter or someone else, you're like, yeah, but what do you think about this? And or what do you about that? And you're like, oh, I'm not really the expert on that, but here's what we do on our farm, and just shift it back, right? And just take ownership of it.
Yeah, I like that. Even myself, because sometimes you feel like you want to speak for agriculture. It's like, oh my goodness, I don't know every in and out about grain. But it's like, wait a minute. If I just speak to my cattle farm,
Mhm.
then I'm talking about what I know. And then, I feel relaxed. So, not
Yeah,
feeling like you're defending the entire agriculture industry, just go on my farm. My,
absolutely.
that's
Yeah,
nice. I like that.
yeah.
You're good at this.
And I should do this for a living, I think. I don't
It's
know.
almost like you do this for a living.
So fun, so
Yeah.
fun. And I mean, don't be shy about sharing principles that all farmers share, and you can say things like farmers share principles like caring for the land, caring for animals, feeding our country. Those are some common roots, I would say, across all types of farmers and agriculture. And then, but on our farm, we do this, or our ranch, we like to do that. And share specific examples. That would be my second piece of advice. So, specific examples. So, if you say we care for the environment, it's like, okay, that's nice. No, tell me specifically. So it's like we delayed our hay cutting so we could have different species of wildlife and birds have habitat for by 2 weeks, or we built a new watering source. And when I go out to see my cows, guess what? I see elk and moose there too. Like so do you see the difference between we care for the environment and then elk and moose or a bald
Yeah.
eagle or like to just
Yeah.
be like when I go out there and I, just pick up some soil in my hand and just think this is better than it was when my grandfather started here.
Mm,
Like a real example like that,
nice.
that and you gotta draw people. I just got goosebumps. That's very strange. You gotta take people there with you, like, describe it because they don't know what you're talking about. They may have never been on a farm or a ranch, right? So you gotta describe it. So it's like when I'm on my horse and I'm riding out to check cows, and I just stop for a minute and listen, and I hear the birds, I see this, then I think, "This is my why. This is why I'm here. This is what makes my job." It's tough, but it's rewarding, and that gets me out of bed in the morning.
I love that. I have actually, and here's one thing, Crystal, I got to ask you. I think a lot of farmers, we take for granted what we see every day. And I have all platforms, and I used to post like my show posts all the time.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, wait a minute, I was walking down my lane. The eagles were chattering in the bush. The birds were going, the frogs were croaking, the cattle were grazing. And I would say probably, I'm not even sure how long now. I'm like, well, this isn't really even LinkedIn worthy because that's business. I'm like, wait a minute. My farm is agriculture and is one of my businesses, but also one of the biggest businesses in Canada, sectors, whatever you want to call
Yeah,
it.
of course.
So we all have a phone. You know what? I have been taking video, 30-second clips, just scanning my
Taking
pasture.
people
I don't
there.
even talk. I post it to all my platforms. You would not
Wow.
believe the response because I thought of it. You can word away, and maybe I'm
Exactly.
not the reader, but
Yeah.
I show them
No,
the
you
sunset,
show them. You took them there. Yeah,
grass,
you
the
brought them there with
birds.
you.
They hear it,
Exactly.
they see it, and I from the comments, I think I changed some perception, and how hard is that? I don't
Yeah.
even need to be the encyclopedia. I just say, "Here's a video, evening, eagles in the back, cattle grazing, this is
Yeah,
agriculture."
I
So
love it.
easy, and
Yeah.
I was overcomplicating it before. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Well, and video is the game for sure. It's the
Wow,
play. We're a video age. I have 2 teenagers. When they are doing research for a school project, they go to YouTube.
right.
They don't look at a PDF. Like they don't look at Word docs. They go to video. They're video learners. And I just feel our whole society is it's just easier. It's visual. You don't have to explain. You can explain with video easier than you can with words, right? When they don't know what you mean.
Yes,
So, yeah, it's absolutely powerful, but it takes them there, right? But sometimes even with video, you need to help them see what they should be seeing.
right.
To be
Yeah,
like, okay, note, we were just ear tagging this cow, but look, she walked right. This is a head gate. Now, notice it's designed to help keep her. So she's 2,000 pounds. I'm not. So this keeps her safe, me safe. I put this, we're doing whatever you're doing, putting an ear tag in. So, an ID tag so we know who she is. Note how she calmly walks out and goes right back to the feeder. She's not
right,
stressed at all about this. Like a little commentaries for some context sometimes with video is still necessary
right.
to just help them see what they should be seeing.
You're right, and especially on some of those videos, right? Because they can look at that and they could
Yeah.
totally take those gates and look at it
Yeah,
totally different. But if you walk them
exactly.
through that, yeah. Okay,
Yeah, and
that's great.
yeah, I learned that, years ago, I did a focus group around hormones in beef, and we agonized over the wording about how to explain if hormones are used in beef, and we showed the video to the focus group. They didn't care at all about the words. They were so worried about the steer in the head gate getting the implant that they didn't listen to anything about the hormones. They were so worried about the animal. So I
Yeah.
guess that's another tip is, animal care first and then, layer your other messages in there.
I could see that. I didn't grow up on a farm, and I think in a way it's a bit of a blessing because I still can look at a situation as a city person, where Anthony, my husband, he looks at that as somebody that's grown up. He just doesn't see it. And I look at
Yeah.
that and go, metal gate, cow look like it's getting
Yeah,
strangled. And
exactly.
I can see what a city person would see. So you're so,
Yeah,
wow. Yeah, that's so
yeah.
smart. Yeah. Okay. I'm
Awesome. And then, my 3rd tip would be, and the most hard for some people, is to show you care and to show the heart. And, there's that famous quote, people don't care how much you know until you know how much you care. And going back to something we said earlier about, I think farmers just take it for granted, like that, these are things we do every day. And we're very comfortable talking about how we do things. We're less comfortable talking about why.
Mm,
And so, obviously there's motivation, there's heart, there's passion behind whatever it is that you grow or raise. You wouldn't do it if you weren't passionate about it. It's not always easy work, right? Mother Nature's a tough boss. There's challenges, there's risks. We always say farmers are the eternal optimists, like Leafs fans. There's always next year, right? I'm not a Leafs fan, but I love a lot of them. And so I just think about when we're communicating, remember what I said, we're not trying to give a lecture. We're trying to engage and connect with people who eat. And it's not consumers, it's not farmers versus consumers. It's everyone who eats, which includes us. So I always say, let's have a conversation with Canadians about food, food first, and then bring it back to the farm, but with heart. And I always joke, nobody's better about talking about their feelings than farmers. Ha ha ha. Right. We're not usually comfortable about that. We're like, well, let me tell you why, and I'll tell you how and all the details and the facts. But it's like, no, tell me about your toughest day.
mm.
When that calf died, or, it didn't work out, right? The rain gauge is over full or empty, like there's tough times. And so I just encourage people to say, here's my worst day, here's my best day, or here's my why, here's what gets me out of bed in the morning, or here's, what I want our farm or ranch to look for in the next 30 years, thinking about the next gen. It's often family, our family is often part of our businesses. And, what does the future look like? And, why are you planting trees today, for the generations to come, whatever it is. But to not be afraid to show some heart. And if you want the best example, in my opinion, Sandy Brock, sheepishly me, is a sheep farmer in Ontario who's from a dairy farm and started her own sheep flock. And her husband is a grain farmer. And she started sharing her stories on YouTube, very personal. And I worked with Sandy to give a talk. She gave a talk to a room full of retailers and restaurant executives. And it was at the end of the day. And I said, okay, next up, we have a farmer who's going to share her story around animal care and animal health. And you could see people exiting, like they were kind of like closing their books up, like, oh, a farmer's going to talk. And anyway, she gets up and starts talking. And like you could have heard a pin drop. But I encouraged her. I'm like, share your worst day, share your best day, and share what their decisions, how they affect your farm person and how they affect your family. And it was probably one of the most powerful presentations I've ever heard from a farmer to a group of influential people. And no books left. They were all, they were just mesmerized by her message. But she has a YouTube channel with over 1 million subscribers now, and people love her. They follow her, they follow along with her journey because she shares shitty things as well. It's not always a sunny day with a butterfly. It's not just because of that. She also shares funny things. She's really talented with video. And I'm saying to all my farm friends, you don't need to start your own YouTube channel. I'm just saying, go there, look at how Sandy shares her story, and then bring some elements of that into the next time you have a conversation. You go to a ball game, your kid's ball game, and the person next to you is like, hey, what do you do for a living? It's like, well, you know what? I'm a farmer. I feed our country, or whatever. Just work in some elements of what she uses on her 1 million+ YouTube channel into your everyday conversations. It doesn't have to be hard.
I love that. I love that. That's three powerful examples. And Sandy, she is great, eh? Just,
She really is.
yeah,
Yeah.
just
She's
having,
a
and there's
rock
so
star.
many farmers like her too that are just amazing at sharing,
Absolutely.
just have a knack for it. It's so nice to see. and
It
giving
really is.
everybody the tools right at their fingertips on their phone, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, a lot of my farm friends are like, Crystal, I choose to farm because I don't like people and I don't like talking to them. And that's cool. Not everybody's designed to be a YouTube
Yeah.
star. You don't have to reach a million, but you can reach one person at a time. You can talk to your kid's teacher, or just your next door neighbor, have a better conversation, even with one person, post a social media post, our own family members, cousins, family and friends, it's like, oh, I didn't know that. It could be just like a little did you know or something you're really proud of. It doesn't have to be big. It can start small and make a difference.
I love it. I think your whole presentation was final words of wisdom on storytelling, and you gave some good action tips there. But for anybody in the audience that is concerned, is still going, I don't know, what would you tell them? Do you have any final words that you want to share with our audience?
Well, I view communications like a sport. And so I feel every sport you need to get some training and some coaching. And I'm biased because I do both. But even before I did, I still get training. NHL hockey players still practice. They're already pretty darn good hockey players, right? So if anyone's feeling a little nervous about, how to tell the farm story, there's lots of training options out there. There's lots of resources you can read. Farm and Food Care has a lot of resources. Agriculture in the Classroom has a lot of resources. We've got training on Utensil.ca. The first one I would recommend for anybody is called Grow Your Brand. So it starts off with a little self awareness. So, what's your personal brand? Because I can give general speak up tips, but not every farmer is a great spokesperson. So, becoming more self aware and about how you think people perceive you and more confident and having more effective communications is the place to start. So, because it's about you first, then tell me about your farm. People usually jump to their farm. They introduce themselves by how many cows they have or how many acres, which is crazy, right? When you think about it, right? You don't have a shoe store owner being like, "Hey, I'm Crystal, 10,000 pairs of Nikes." Like, what? Like that's ridiculous, right? So grow your brand is probably the base training I would recommend, and it's very accessible. It's $99. You can go on, take it on your own time. It could be 10 o'clock at night, whenever you can pause it. Just put some thought into your personal communication style and your personal brand first. Then think about how you represent your farm, your sector, and really, you may be the only person in agriculture somebody ever gets a chance to meet.
Yeah.
So, how to make a good impression and not feel overwhelmed to be like, "Hey, I'm not sure about that, but let me get your info. I'll get back to you," or here's some good resources that'll have the answers you need.
Oh, I love that. We'll put links to all of those resources on
That
the
would be
show
great.
page, you guys. So if
Yeah,
you are listening and you didn't jot them down, go to Farm Market or Impact Farming, find the episode, go to the bottom, and you'll find those links. And we'll help you promote that course as well, Crystal. That sounds
that would be
fantastic.
amazing. Yeah, thank you. And I mean, we developed all the training on Utensil.ca with great heart for the people who work in our food system, starting with our farm friends, to say, what tools do we need to be more effective, whether it's communicating or working in agriculture, just really elevate people and give them the support, the coaching, the confidence, to just help them do a little better in whatever role they decide to play.
Well, I'm so glad that you stepped up and started doing that along with the great organizations that are already doing it. But if you think of it, it's a bit of a void. Everybody's before without you guys. If you look at it, mainstream media has their stories. If it bleeds, it leads, and it
Yeah,
might not be in the favor of farming. Farmers are so busy. So it's often hard to know, like we've just discussed, what to say, where to find out. So it's amazing that there's companies stepping up like you guys, like those organizations to help farmers because somewhere we need to know what to say and how to say it so we can do what we need to do, right?
absolutely. Because if a farmer is going to take even 10 minutes out of their busy day to communicate, I want them to be effective. I'm like, if you take 10 minutes to take a picture, a video, to post it, how do you get the most impact? Right. So that's what brings me joy.
I love it. So, can you do one final call out? If somebody wants to connect with you, check out your platforms, can you just give them your handles, websites, all that good
Sure.
stuff?
Yeah, the easiest way to find me and all the work we do is to go to loft32.ca. Loft, like a hayloft. 32, because it's our business number. It's also my hockey number, very Canadian. So loft32.ca is kind of like home base. And then utensil.ca is where all the online training platforms live. And you can reach me through either of those. Reach out anytime. So all the online trainings there, of course, and some farmers reach out to me to do personalized coaching to say, I want to improve my presentation skills, or, and the beautiful thing about platforms like you and I are talking on right now is somebody could be in BC or Newfoundland, and we can have a coaching session to say, let's go through your presentation. Or, if you're doing something important and you need some help, again, view it like a sport, just like an athlete, get some coaching, get some training.
I love it. Crystal, I don't want to let you go. I should have said, can we talk about 10 tips, please? That was all amazing, amazing episode, but you're so much fun to talk to and you communicate this so well for our audience. So I really appreciate you coming on the show. I appreciate your time and knowledge. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Tracy. And I love that you added the word fun because that's something I forgot, and we should never forget to have fun.
Oh,
Sometimes we take ourselves a little too seriously and our topics very seriously in agriculture. Remember, food is fun. Get together, you have food, you have drinks. It's not always an issue, right? So don't forget to have the fun. That's a good last minute. I'm glad you added that word.
I like that. That's an
Yeah.
excellent way to end. Well, Crystal, thank you again. You guys in the audience, if you love this episode as much as I did, like it, share it, get it out there, and connect with Crystal. If you want to learn more, go to utensil.ca. Again, all the links will be in there, and you guys can access some great training. So thank you all, and see you next week. Bye bye.